Aloha, this is the Waianae local campus. Registration started last week for classes in summer and fall. We're offering several summer classes for free, Native Hawaiians, residents of 96792. I encourage people to take the opportunity and drop on by.
And where are we?
And we're located in Miley, right next to the Miley Elementary School.
And what is this place called?
Waianae local campus.
Okay, Leeward Community College, because you never said that, but I'm saying that. Okay.
Mahalo.
Yes. And then what's going on here?
Hi, everybody. So we're waiting for folks to trickle on in, but we're having a discussion tonight, which is on the board because it's a long title. But we're looking at what it is like living inside of collapsing empire, and we want to discuss how building peace and friendship actually happens under occupation and what the future might look like and how we can be prepared. There's a long series of really like discussions about preparedness because things are changing rapidly and we gotta do something.
Who's our guest speakers tonight?
So our guest speaker, so this is a part of a series that's going until November. So every third Friday we have our beloved host Hoka Lainui and joined by friends. And so for this month, our friend is Uncle Sparky Rodriguez, and actually all of the friends who are inside the audience because it's really a group discussion, but we want to have some context and some ideas shared from our esteemed panelists. So, would you like to introduce yourself? A little bit, small kind, and then we can go kind of straight into the discussion.
I guess I'm somewhat an esteemed panelist. My name is Hoka Lainui, and this is my brother who will be also joining in this discussion.
And I'm just lost in confusion and overwhelmed with the subject. How do we survive in a collapsing nation, society? So that's going to be the discussion. And I will probably go all over the place. So, shall we start?
Go ahead.
Do you have any burning thoughts to begin with, or do you want me to ask a question to start?
No,
us off?
I'm just going to start, and then you can fill in the blanks and stuff. So, last year I attended a conference, and one of the discussions that came up in a breakout session was what would happen if the U.S. collapsed.
That must have been a good conference.
It was wild. But what came out of it is a discussion of that kind of collapse was that now you could possibly have red states and blue states, and within the military having leaders that are red state supporters or blue state supporters. So it sets up almost a civil war kind of scenario. So how do we survive something like that? I've got to go back to Makua because that's where the origins of my involvement. And in Makua, the military's occupied that location since the late 1920s. So we're coming up on 100 years of training, of bombing, of bullets, bombs, unexploded ordnance. So how do we feel about our Aina? And I was asked by a colonel, are you willing to trade land for Makua? And it was almost their attitude, they want me to trade my grandmother for somebody else's grandmother. So of course that answer is no. And in Makua, because it's been used for live fire training for decades, well again, almost 100 years, their lease comes up, and it's a 65-year lease, but they've been using it for a long time before that and firing over the people that live there. In fact, Uncle Walter Kamana, who lived at his grandmother's place when he was a child, he said middle of the night they'd be firing over him from the ocean, and all the kids would have to run out of the house, across the street, under the railroad bridge with their pillow and blanket. They didn't know when it was going to start, when it was going to end, but that was what they had to do. So their grandmother lived there for a long time until martial law in World War II. It was forced out at gunpoint, many of them. Military say they own all the properties that are Kuleana lands in fee. So there's a lot of conflict that had gone on. So this, in my mind, is part of the collapse, because they were taken but never returned. So Malama Makua's mission now is, there's a piece in there that is, Makua is the Piku of Peace, and Ho'eho'e'ea. The Piku of Peace, for me, helped get me centered of what that means for Makua. It's a center of peace. So it's not about only Makua, it's how do I behave. And for Makua, there's this legacy of pain and desecration. So they're not training right now. They haven't trained for the last 20 years, no live fire. But there's still the pain that's in the land. So I've had a hard time to understand the word peace, because I don't feel that there's peace there yet. So this one scholar, Johan Galtung, had defined peace in two ways that helped me understand. And I know Poka would be able to define that more clearly. But there's a positive peace and a negative peace. I feel Makua is still living under the pressure and shadow of the negative peace. The positive peace is one that has justice in it. And we don't quite have justice in Hawaii. So in the collapse that's going on in the US right now, with all of the tariffs, with all the uncertainty going on, not only in business, but jobs, and a lot of people who supported the current administration are unemployed. And all of those nonprofits who are very dependent on American and governmental financial support have been cut. And now the question is, can you survive? Will you still do the business? Will you still be able to promote your mission without surviving from the funds from the federal government? And I don't think so. But if we can figure out a way of doing that and thrive, we'll find out that we no longer need them. We need to figure out how to do that. And this is where the preparation and the planning and the survival part of it, how do we survive in an emergency? And this is what it is. All of society is crashed and burned. Now what do? We cannot depend on a government that cannot be depended upon. So we just need to keep on thinking and looking down the road. What helped me when I came back from Vietnam was that I was torn between being American and being Hawaiian. And over time, I was able to work that out. And it's not that I'm anti-American or anti-military. I'm pro-Hawaiian, pro-Aina. So that gave me clarity on what and how to do things. So it gave me a sense of peace, that I was able to communicate with the military, who for a long time I thought was the enemy, and found out that they're more family. They're just behaving badly. So talking about sovereignty, talking about our independence, about their illegal occupation, I'm able to talk to the generals and the admirals and all these guys and tell them that, and ask them when they're going to start doing the right thing and make sure that the Hawaiian nation is reestablished. So they say that's beyond my ability. Take it up to the Department of, one guy said Interior, another one said take it to the Department of State. So in our peace efforts, positive peace, negative peace, we've got a long way to go. And one of the paths that we've been working on this last year is the University of Makua, or the Makua University. And it was one of Leandra's, my wife, before she passed, her idea of developing a university that would end up developing the best technology for UXO cleanup and the restoration of Makua. So a group that was inspired by that has started. So developing the curriculum, developing the beginning process, and how do we take the next step. And getting Poka involved, for me, was one of the inspirational part, because he's got so many things that really tweaks the understanding of what peace, independence, and sovereignty is able to be understood by somebody like me, because I'm a really slow learner. And with that,
you're deliberate. You're not slow. You just
yeah, let it all out. So I'm gonna pass this back to Poka, and maybe the questions that you were talking about, make them simple, because don't get too academic.
The name Johann Galtung had been invoked, and he was a master of peace. He started peace studies, in essence, throughout the world. And when he was teaching at the University of Hawaii, and I had the opportunity to teach with him, and he also came out to Waianae when I was executive director of the mental health clinic to give a lecture on peace. And so what I'm going to do is try to share some of his thoughts about the study, the analysis of peace. How do we break it down? And he says to understand peace and to understand violence is as simple as ABC. So if you look at the chart on the board, and if we put a point A as the left lower corner, and that would stand for aspirations, attitudes, sort of the deep culture, or what are the belief system of a society, of a people, however you want to divide it. And on the right corner, you put C for conditions, contradictions, conflicts. And at the top, you put B for behavior. And often when we talk about peace and violence, we just look at behavior. We look at male behavior, female behavior. Male behavior, the direct action, the stabbing, the shooting, the fighting. If you look at female behavior, what is a female behavior in terms of this ABC triangle? The female behavior is more the hidden, the teasing, the discrimination, the sort of silent action. Women oftentimes, rather than stabbing, they poison. So that's their choice. So you have in behavior male, female behavior. But when the society looks at the issue of violence in the community or the issue of peace in the community, they tend to look at only point B, behavior. How do we stop the shooting, the killing, and all of these activities going on? What erupts into point B is a function of point A and is a function of point C. It's the attitude of the community, the society. It's the contradictions within the community. They say we respect Hawaiian rights. Hawaiians have the right to travel. But when you exercise the right to travel and a cop stops you and they say, "Where's your license?" and you respond in Olelo, Hawaii. Now he's all pissed off because he doesn't speak the language. So he's going to discriminate against you immediately. Those are the conditions in the society. And so the response is, hey, what the hell? You know, I'm supposed to have the right to travel, all that kind of stuff. So you have the contradictions. And it creates behavior at point B. Now a person can respond in violence or peace. But oftentimes it's the cops who then respond. How come you talking to me in Hawaiian? You trying to make me shame? No, the society says you're supposed to have the right to speak your language. And if the enforcers of the law do not speak one of the legitimate languages, there's major contradictions. When they tell you you should all get employed, go get employment. So you go to a company and they tell you, fill out this form. And the form is an Americanized form for Internal Revenue Services. And before you can be employed, you gotta fill out their form. But you say, I'm not an American, why should I fill it out? The history of Hawaii tells you that if you say you're not an American, you ain't an American, because they stole Hawaii. The contradiction in the society. You have many of these conditions, contradictions, conflicts in the society that causes behavior so that people try to act faithfully to their beliefs, but they are forced into these contradictions. I refuse to finance my colonization. I refuse to file an income tax return. And now they criminalize me because of my position. And my position ain't illegal. It's appropriate to our history. You know, I received a telephone call from director of movies, and he tells me, we want to do a movie about your client. Now I know what client he's talking about. He's talking about Happy Pulava. And we want to address the issue of criminality in Hawaii. And my response, bullshit. You want to talk about criminality, let's talk about the real crime that has occurred in Hawaii, and it occurred since the overthrow. So if you want to talk to me further, you go read my papers, you go read about Hawaii's history, and then you give me a call and we'll talk about criminality in Hawaii and why the Hawaiians are responding in this particular way because of the crime that has been brought into Hawaii. So you have these conditions, contradictions, and many times interpreters of history do not understand, and they need to be corrected before we should be willing to participate. So that's the idea of what is the conditions. What are you talking about conditions? When Bank of Hawaii says, well, I cannot open your bank account because you don't have a Social Security number. What the hell are you talking about? It has nothing to do with Social Security. I just want to place my money where I think it's going to be safe. But they tie you down, they lock you down. They create these contradictions. When you tell the blacks in America previously that if you want to catch a bus, you got to go sit in the back of the bus. But what happened to the theory that we have equality in this society? They create the contradiction so that people have to react, and so the behavior is seen as troublemakers, as violence. If your attitude on the other side, you talk about always domination. We got the best military in the world. We can lick anybody. We got the best football team. And this constant concept of we better than everybody else. It's the whole thing we talked about previously. Domination, individualism, and exclusion, DIE. And we keep feeding our students with die. Educate yourself so that you can be number one, excluding everybody else. Instead of this idea of association with, helping one another. No, you help your own self, number one, you number one. So you breed that kind of attitudes, aspirations in the individual. You individualize it. You say, it's okay to have a gun because you can protect yourself. Never mind about the rest of the society. Just make sure that you have stored in your family guns. And then you build a society with that attitude. It is point A and point C, attitudes and conditions that put your pressure up, building to point B. And that's where you have the eruption. If you ask yourself, why is it that we have so much violence in the community? Well, take a look at attitudes. Take a look at the conditions. When you don't have sufficient employment, sufficient education in the community, what do you have? You have this pressure that builds up to point B. Well, I'm gonna kill that bastard. And so you respond in that miniature way. So you can draw a dotted line that sort of follows the AC line, but you draw it between B and A and C. A dotted line, no, up higher, higher,
Oh, you're talking
higher,
about,
higher, in the middle of the triangle. And you call, yeah, right along there. Here, okay?
oh,
And when you talk about B, all you're looking at is behavior. But people do not take the time to look below the line.
oh, so like an iceberg,
Yeah, at
like
A
water.
and C. No, just, that's it.
water, okay.
Yeah.
I was gonna say water.
They don't look below your dotted line, the visibility, invisibility line. They don't look at your A, what's happening at A, what's happening at C. And when you have limited funds, you put the funds only to controlling B rather than changing A and changing C.
Oh, I need the little cap.
Oh, sorry. So that's the analysis of looking at the issue of peace and violence in a society. If you want to change the society itself, whatever society you have, look at your attitudes, look at your aspirations, look at your hopes and dreams, look at your deep culture, and begin to change the deep culture. Look at your conditions in the society. What kind of structures do you have? What kind of banks do you have? What kind of schools do you have? What kind of employment do you have? Those all will influence your behavior, the way people drive and all that stuff, and what they carry with them, their attitudes and all that stuff. It's your A and C line which will help to determine what your point B is, what your behavior is. And then we can look further into the details of B. What is positive and negative peace? Just because you don't have fighting, you don't have shooting, you don't have killing in the society, does not necessarily mean it's a peaceful society. It's a suppressed society, which is essentially what Hawaii is today.
Yep.
We are suppressed. And as the time goes by in the Hawaii society, as people forget about Liliuokalani, as people forget about the landing of the American troops, as people forget about the illegalities that have occurred in Hawaii, not only in Makua, where they took the land there by executive order, but look at Lualualei and all the Hawaiians that used to live there. That was Hawaiian homelands previously. Until one day the military came in, you folks got to move out. You get 1 week to move. And the folks at Makua, at Lualualei was saying, how are we going to move? We don't know trucks, we don't know where we're going to move to. We all residing here, they say 1 week and then we're coming in. They came in 1 week and they moved their stuff, they threw it all away. You know, and there were a lot of Hawaiians who had very precious materials with them. The kahilis that, what was her name, told me about. Her family heirlooms. They took it and they just dumped it. So that's another place that we've got to go after. We've got to go after really all of the lands of Hawaii. So anyway, that is how I analyze the issue of peace and violence, that we have to look at attitudes, that idea of deep culture, how we need to substitute from die, domination, individualism, and exclusion to Olu, Ola, Olu, Lokahi, and Aloha. That will start us changing our own attitudes. Many of our people are die people. You know, they are feisty, they go get their gun, they go contest others and all that stuff. We got to change that attitude and tell them that's not Hawaiian. That's only elitist thinking. Conditions, we got to look at what is going on in our society, how the schools are treating our people, how the financial institutions, the corporations, how they operate, and they continue to carry out that discrimination against Native Hawaiians because we don't, quote, follow the law. The law itself needs to be changed, needs to be examined. Just because it's a law doesn't mean that it is correct. So anyway, that's my analysis of peace and violence in the society. Any questions?
I have a question. Unless somebody else has a question right now.
How difficult is it to move the invisible line?
What?
How difficult is it to move the invisible line so
Oh.
that we start putting the money?
By education, letting people understand what is an analytical foundation to look at peace and violence, because oftentimes we only talk about who and shoot who or the accident that happened and all that. We're only looking at the action itself rather than taking the time to look at the underlying pressures that is pushing the action. And we need to lift it, we need to discuss it, criticize it, even criticize our own selves.
Sounds like hope.
Emily has some questions
A
too.
lot of hope on the point involved, yeah.
Kickstart discussion, because I think everybody would want to weigh in.
Yeah, so I kind of want to back up to defining what we mean by collapse, because whatever we mean by collapse is gonna determine like what we actually can do about the outcome. So how are you defining that, or what is it that you're
I
thinking?
see the empire as having collapsed a long time ago. Since the overthrow and the promise that we are a Christian American nation. And Liliuokalani was very clear about, then why are you stealing our land? Do not, what did she say? Do not,
It's not very Christian-like of them.
what was that?
It's not very Christian-like of them to steal.
Yeah, essentially that was it. And I think the empire has collapsed. I was talking with some local Christians, and I explained the fact of the overthrow, the illegality, the violation of international law, the violation of Hawaii's law, the treaty between Hawaii and the United States, and that the theft was illegal. And this very Christian man said, you know, I agree with you, but if we give back Hawaii, then somebody else will come and steal it. So I said, but the Christian thought is that thou shalt not steal. Are you telling me that it's negotiable now? That if somebody else will steal them first, then we can steal them and hang on to it? You know, this great belief in Christianity has fallen. Thou shalt not kill, and they're committing crimes and sending us to go fight their wars. So I'm saying that Hawaii, to survive, needs to hold to its principles of pono. That